Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Daily IoT. On today's episode, I'm just going to share a tip for identifying pins on printed circuit boards. In this case, our breakout board for our EPaper display. I've been calling it e-ink. Internet searches have led me to understand that most of these are going to be called EPaper displays. And so I've been trying to get the Crystal Fonts EPaper display connected to the Photon. I'm about 3 hours in and massively disappointed with the documentation on this. I understand why beginners, especially getting into this sort of thing, would give up by now. I would if I wasn't so bent on getting this thing into a hockey puck for our project. So trying to figure this out, and I came across the documentation from Crystal Fonts on this breakout board and found that it is wrong. It's not labeled correctly, and there's a couple of problems with it. But I wanted to share out of that a tip for how just looking at a printed circuit board many times, you can do a sanity check of whether the pins are actually labeled correctly in the documentation. So let me show you that. Okay, instead of taking the time to overlay this on the video, we're just gonna hack it and use my computer screen here. I wanna take just a second to talk about how I figured out that the documentation from Crystal Fonts was wrong. So going back to our power ground signal bound, the first thing that we need to do before we can use a component is we need to connect everything up to our main platform, in this case, the Photon. And so I was looking for documentation of what the pins on this little breakout board were so that I could connect it to the Photon. And as I looked, you've got Crystal Fonts documentation here, a picture that I took of the back side of the board over here. And let's talk about this first of all. Terrible picture. That's just the header, which means you could be looking at it like this, or you could be looking at it like this. And so, numbering it like this without showing the rest of the board is kind of confusing. Now, you can see that the board kind of starts to protrude a little bit here, and there's some glare on the header. And so really, they're showing it oriented like this. However, the pins that they've labeled here, 1, 2, down to 19 and 20, do not match when you flip the board over and look at it based on the way that they've taken a picture here, don't match. So they have labeled it backwards to front and back. So that's wrong. First of all, that's wrong. So you would say, well, which one of these is correct? Is this pin 1 or is this pin 1? Because they refer to different pins on here. First problem. Second problem is the function that they've listed here, 3.3 volts ground and things, are also not correct, at least in some cases. At that point, the document is complete garbage. You can't rely on it for anything. So we've got to find another source. But a way that I found that this was not correct is a little tip that I'd like to share about how you can look at a printed circuit board and sometimes figure out what pins are, and then compare it to the documentation. And so here's a close-up of the board, the back side of the board, and you'll notice that there's some of these parts that are bright red, and then there's this dull red. The dull red is where the copper has been completely etched away, and it leaves the brighter hue of red, which are things like the traces. You can see the little printed circuit board, wires as they were. But when you see them around header pins, like you can see this bright red area where there's unetched copper, a lot of times that is ground. And so good PCB design, I'm not an expert, it's just things I've learned, you'll use ground chunks all throughout your board to make it so that high frequency noise gets dampened out or absorbed. I'm probably not using the right terms there, but you'll see big chunks of bright red where that part of the board is grounded to help isolate traces from picking up noise. Now, where that's important is over here, you can see this big bright red spot right here, and these pins right here connect right to it. So first of all, they're connected together, which this says they aren't, and they're likely connected to ground, 98% sure. And if we look at it, we can see that near the bottom, again, these are labeled wrong. We have ground on one side, not connected on the other side, which is wrong. The two pins are connected together. And then right above that, you can see, I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera, but these two pins are also connected together. There's a trace going between them. That is likely the 3.3 volt supply. On here, it says one side is 3.3 volts, the other side is a no connect, which means don't connect anything to it, which again is wrong. They're both connected together, so they're the same pin. And so from that, we know that the Crystal Font's documentation is garbage and we need to ignore it. Luckily, Good Display, who actually makes the breakout, has some documentation that we can look at that has the correct pinouts so that we can get everything connected. But the tip again is if you see these bigger chunks of unetched copper that will appear brighter than the etched portions, that's normally ground, and it can help you identify pins that are connected to ground. All right, and we're gonna call that an episode for today. Just a quick tip. Again, I'm working on getting this connected. In doing all this research, I found that Crystal Fonts is literally just buying these from China, slapping a sticker on the back. You can just see they just slap their little part number sticker on there and reselling them at a massive markup. This breakout board's only like $12 directly from Good Display. Crystal Fonts is selling it for $37. Criminal. Same thing, they're marking up the display as well, which is fine. It's not criminal to buy things from China and resell them, but marking a breakout board up that much is crazy in my opinion. And so we're working on that. We're kind of working through the process of getting to a place where we can actually run code on our Photon to control this. And so stay tuned, I will have an update. We are gonna work our way through it. The sample code is garbage, the documentation is garbage, but it is my mission to make it understandable for anybody to pick up one of these and an associated breakout board and connect it to your project. So stay tuned for future episodes on that. Question of the day. First day of fall was over the weekend, Friday or Saturday or something. I am really excited, as you know, of hockey season starting and all things like that. But I'm, like I said, more of a cold. We've done a, do you prefer the hot or the cold? Now the question of the day is, what is your favorite season? I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you so much to those that have been reaching out with comments. I love the feedback and I very much appreciate the kind words. I hope everybody has an awesome week. And thanks again for watching Daily IoT, the show where together we're learning how to make the Internet of Things one day at a time. Getting started, and I just had a 4-year-old walk into the room. Hello. You want to say hi? Look up and say hi to the people. Right there. Say it to the camera. Say hey.
Hi.
Hey, did you come get me for lunch?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be up in a minute. Love kids.